afternoon to all of you. Thanks for joining us here on The Big Story on Mirror Now. I am Afrida Rahman Ali. Let's begin with some breaking news coming. While hearing Centre's plea against Delhi High Court's contempt notice, Supreme Court said that putting the officers for contempt will not bring oxygen, but there need to be a solution to this. Court asked Centre as to why it denied the top court the fixed amount of 700 metric ton oxygen as was put forward as the requirement by the Delhi government, and the Centre's denial led to this contempt notice. The top court asked Centre that how is it planning to cater to Delhi's oxygen demands and how much has already been allocated. Court also asked to make a more scientific formula for oxygen allocation and asked Centre to speak to Mumbai civic body to take lessons and learn from their experience. Meanwhile, the Centre has sought an audit of Delhi's oxygen requirements before the Supreme Court. More breaking news coming in, where we are getting information now that the Supreme Court has stayed the contempt proceedings against Centre. Stay on the contempt proceedings initiated by the Delhi High Court. Earlier, the Centre had moved the Supreme Court against the High Court notice. Let me go across to Meenakshi to get the latest on this. Meenakshi?
Well, yes, big news coming in, which we are getting for our viewers, which we have tracked throughout the hearing. The Supreme Court has stepped in and it has stayed the initiation of contempt proceedings that we had seen yesterday from the Delhi High Court. And several reasons behind that. The Supreme Court bench led by Honorable Justice D.Y. Chandrachud feels that the Supreme Court is not here to place blame on the state and also the Centre. And contempt charges would not serve any purpose. The larger purpose is to find a solution to this problem. Supreme Court very cognizant of the fact that it is, at the end of the day, also answerable to the people of Delhi. And the Supreme Court has sought by tomorrow, 10:30 a.m., an action plan from the central government as to how it plans to meet the oxygen requirement of Delhi, which is 700 metric tons per day. So central government will now submit a proposal or a plan as to how it plans to do that. And in the meantime, the contempt proceedings, as was initiated by the Delhi High Court yesterday, which we had broken to our viewers by virtue of issuing of the show cause notice, has been stayed just moments back by the Supreme Court of India. So two or three important aspects. The Supreme Court acknowledging the fact that this is a complex issue. Supreme Court making suggestions to the central government that it should coordinate better and come up with some specific solutions rather than having a broad, generic overall plan. Supreme Court suggesting to the Centre that it should coordinate or take some inputs from the Municipal Corporation of Mumbai as to how it went about handling the crisis at its end. Perhaps that model can be replicated. Supreme Court also making the observation as to how it is not here to find fault with the Centre or other state government. Supreme Court acknowledging that this can have a demoralizing impact on officers who are already stretched beyond their means and are working to meet the requirements. But the Supreme Court, at the end of the day, wants specific answers, and that answers from the central government has to come by 10:30 a.m. tomorrow.
Okay, so 10:30 a.m. is the deadline, and Meenakshi will keep us updated on this. The fact of the matter is the central government is being pulled up by the Supreme Court once again on the issue of oxygen supply. The shortfall continues in multiple metro cities across India. Meenakshi, thanks for joining us. In fact, on Big Story today, this is the issue that we are focusing on, looking at what the courts have to say on behalf of the citizens. The courts are now clearly articulating public anger. In a hearing today, the Karnataka High Court once again rapped the Centre, asking them why the oxygen quota for the state has not increased yet. The High Court repeated its stinging remark from yesterday, asking the Centre how many more people need to die, how many more people will have to lose their lives before a decision on raising the quota is taken? That's the question raised by the Karnataka High Court. The High Court also observed that the Supreme Court had asked for a buffer stock to be created 4 days ago, but till date, there is no detail coming in on that, whether such a buffer stock is being created or not. Remember, over the past 2 weeks, 15 courts, including the Supreme Court and the several other state high courts, have pulled up the centre as well as the state governments over COVID mismanagement and the oxygen crisis. But on ground, the situation remains unchanged. It's not as if the requirements are met with. Hospitals are still clamouring for replenishments which have not come in on time, and we have a detailed list of which are the hospitals that have now put out the information in the public domain as to how many hours of oxygen is left with them. All this information is very much available both to the centre and the state, but are they doing the needful? Are they doing enough to address these concerns? So patients and their kin, even as we speak, are running from pillar to post to meet these basic requirements, these life-saving requirements of, say, an oxygen cylinder or an essential drug, in some cases an ICU bed. So that's the focus of the big story today. I'm going to introduce my guest joining us this afternoon here on the big story. Let me just introduce joining us today, Kailash Vasudev, Senior Advocate of the Supreme Court. Thank you so much, Mr. Vasudev, for joining us. Also, Ravi Srivastava, Political Analyst, also with us on Big Story. Very good afternoon, gentlemen. I begin, by just putting it out for our viewers that the harshest of terms have been used by the courts to describe the inaction, the mismanagement, the complete lack of discipline in organizing the basic, essential and emergency items that is required in a public health emergency situation. The courts have called it a carnage, a genocide, even a criminal act. From what we are getting to hear from the proceedings in court, viewers, 24 deaths have happened in 4 cities that we are reporting today due to oxygen shortage. That's the reality staring at us. Contempt proceedings is what it has come to now against officials, which we were just reporting, and Meenakshi was giving us an update on how the the Supreme Court, I beg your pardon, has put a stay on that contempt order, which was issued by the High Court. It has really come down to that now. The mismanagement that we are looking at and the failure in policy. Now, when we talk about bottlenecks, when we talk about the clogging that is happening in this distribution network, where is the clogging? Is it really in the pipelines or is it in policy making? That's the question that citizens are asking today. I would like to first go across to Ravi Srivastava to get an understanding, Mr. Srivastava, that, the taxpayers today are in a situation where they are asking that, are we the ones who are supposed to organize oxygen? When a relative falls ill, what do we pay tax for? I mean, one can understand that you have to make some arrangements on your own. You're willing to pay a price for it. But the facility that the government is supposed to provide in terms of basic health care is missing. The state governments very conveniently, of course, push the responsibility to the centre. But tell us, wouldn't you concede that the Delhi government has failed in its forward planning? That's what we are wanting to talk about as well. It's not just about what's happening now. It is about whether the governments of the day did the requisite planning beforehand. Did it envisage a situation like this? Did it have enough oxygen buffer stock in the hospital? Did it really dither in setting up those oxygen plants, Ravi Srivastava?
Afrida, I agree with you. I fully agree with you. It's a situation here where everybody has failed. Everybody has failed, whether it is a state, whether it is center, everywhere there is a problem. What happens is the system can take up to a limit. If it goes beyond that, the system starts collapsing. Now, India needed 6,500 metric ton of the oxygen every day, and the requirement has now gone up to 9,000 metric tons per day. So the problem is that the policy makers did not anticipate that requirement will go to such an heavy extent, and they could not plan it. But as far as Delhi is concerned, it is definitely the fault of the center, which has been highlighted by the Honorable High Court and by the Honorable Supreme Court also, because the Chief Minister of Delhi has been harping for last 3 weeks that you give me the oxygen, I can save the lives of people. And the center did not provide them the gas. And it happened to such an extent that he wanted 700 metric ton. He was given only 312 metric ton, at least for 10 days. And as a result, you have seen that many people have died because of oxygen, and
No,
not
Mr.
alone.
Srivastav, my reporter in Delhi tells us that Delhi's current requirement is 967 metric tons. And what it is
900.
getting, as per Alok, who is reporting consistently from the ground, is 400 metric tons. Imagine the shortfall. And, you would know this, that when we talk about an oxygen disruption, it immediately leads to a fatality. There is no two ways about it. This is simply about life and death. And I want to understand, is the state government, is the Delhi government taking that seriously enough? I mean, it has to do whatever it takes to get the oxygen to the hospitals. Is it really doing that?
Afrida, I think Delhi government is absolutely sensitive about it. And if you see the representatives of the government, may it be Raghav Chadda, Mr. Arvind Kejriwal himself, Mr. Somnath Bharti, all these people, they have been shouting on the top of their voice that please give us the oxygen. We have the beds available, but we cannot provide the oxygen on that bed. So bed is of no use. And that is the reason that Delhi people are just starving for the oxygen, and several deaths have taken place because of that. I think you will.
No, but you have woken up now. The question I asked you was about forward planning. The question I asked you was about having a system in place. Should there be an emergency of this nature? You were underprepared. That is what can be said about the Delhi government, and I am sure you will agree to it. Today, you are saying that we are not getting the help and assistance required, but what were you doing all this while? Did you prepare a roadmap? A second wave was coming. Everyone knew about it. Yes, I agree. You may not have anticipated the severity of it. But why should the hospitals not have enough buffer stocks? Why should the depletion happen this fast? And now that you see it happening, are you doing enough to replenish it? Because I hear that a lot of the issues are now with cryogenic tankers, with the distribution network, with the whole logistics, something that is clearly in the hands of the Delhi government. I'll come back to you on that point, Ravi Srivastav. Let me bring in Mr. Kailash Vasudev as well. Mr. Vasudev, the courts have come up with very strict orders. There are observations made literally on a daily basis. The courts have gone to the extent, at least in the case of Delhi, to say beg, borrow, steal, but get the oxygen to those beds where patients are gasping for breath. But, is this kind of messaging enough, or is there something more that needs to be done? What is the role of judiciary in this? What can it really do?
Good afternoon. See, the judiciary is only there to give directions and hear everybody and then come to a decision. Here, the judiciary is feeling frustrated. After all, in a democracy, judiciary is a very vital limb which does regulate and help in regulating the system. The executive in delivering goods to the citizens. You had the COVID breakout last year, lost a couple of tragic number of lives. You've had a breakout this year, which is again taking a huge number of lives. If you look at it in that perspective, for dealing with the COVID, there is no infrastructure, starting from hospitals, medicines, essential supplies like oxygens, graveyards, crematoriums, places where one can go and get treated or leave the world peacefully. This is leaving a very acrimonious feeling to all of us. We have time for everything but infrastructure. We are spending thousands of crores on unnecessary elements. And in the bargain, you are now instigating the citizenry to feeling a situation of absolute penury, disgust, and pain in what they're going through. Which family has not suffered this time? Which particular group of people have not suffered, from children who are in the infancy, down to school-going children, down to college-going students, from adults. I mean, it's been across the board. You've lost hundreds and hundreds of lives every day. But the frustration of the court is because they feel that the systems have failed. The court can only request, it can only direct, it can only beseech, it can only use its jurisdictions to call upon the government to do something. Here is a situation where between governments, we are having clashes. The citizen doesn't bother as to who is in government. The citizen bothers about getting necessary medical assistance for himself or for his near and dear ones. The order of contempt from the Delhi High Court came in frustration. It came because all their attempts to get oxygen into the city didn't work. the Karnataka High Court observations, the other court observations saying that this is amounting to murder and so on and so forth. You see, it tells you the feeling of anarchy which is set into the executive. Executive thinks of
Yes.
financial gains to itself. You have pay commissions, you have pay hikes, you have everything. But the citizen who pays an honest tax gets nothing. The average citizen on the street who begs for a living gets nothing. Anybody who is not connected with government is on the wrong side of life. Are we living only to finance government, or are we financing government to finance citizens? This is becoming the bigger question today. I mean,
Yes.
I'm sorry to say.
Yes, absolutely, Mr. Vasudev. And the fact of the matter is, there is the Mumbai example which has been cited to actually establish that if there is a political will, if there is a collaborative effort, if the civic bodies take enough responsibility, things do improve.
No,
And I am not saying this as somebody who is living in Mumbai. I'm saying this what the courts have said today.
No,
The Supreme Court has said today, draw lessons from how the BMC has managed.
For a minute.
So in that sense, it leads us to believe that it's as if the governments have not done their bit. And if they did, it would not relegate or deteriorate to this extent, Mr. Vasudev.
No. I was just reading a very small forward which I received about the collector of a district called Nandurbar. It's in Maharashtra. If you do look it up, I do not know how far it is correct or not. I don't easily get carried in by what the WhatsApp and the forwards have to say. But this young man had prepared the district for the past 6 months to deal with this kind of a situation. It's a tribal district. See what a remarkable job he did. If a small collector in a big district dealing with tribals can do such a remarkable service, I see no reason why educated government employees, supported by educated politicians, supported by all the infrastructure available to them in the think tanks, have not been able to do. Have we become so perverse? Have we become so terrible?
Let Mr. Ravi Srivastav respond to that. Mr. Srivastav, there can be no defense for this. And I agree with Mr. Vasudev that you're sitting with all the paraphernalia, with all the think tanks at your disposal. Are you telling us that you're failing to deliver? I mean, and when we say the systems have failed, I can give you a small example what we mean. Your dashboards are not working. A person has to go looking for a bed. Where does he go to? He has to go to a helpline, which you keep talking about, which your Chief Minister of Delhi keeps talking about, that these are the systems we have put out. None of those things are working. We have reporters who have done investigative reports in detail, and we are running it on a daily basis, that these helplines are showing numbers, the dashboards are showing figures of so many beds available. It's a lie. And we have exposed that time and again. Systems have failed, the dashboards are misleading. You imposed lockdowns with the promise that you will use the time to ramp up facilities. That was a lie as well, Mr. Srivastav.
Afrida, I am not disagreeing with you. I am also agreeing the advocate Kailash Vasudev to the extent. Yes, the executive, some people have definitely failed. The example given of Nandarbar, I am well aware, a very, very fine gentleman who did a good job. But then at the same time, executives, some people have definitely become lethargic, they are incompetent, they are inefficient, and as a result, the whole government and the whole class has to suffer. I think such people must be taken to task, whether they are in the state government employees or whether they are the central government employees. If they have failed, they must pay the price for that, because there is no excuse for that. The human life is ultimate. If the human lives are lost, then there is no use of having this paraphernalia or this, the whole setup for the so-called system which has collapsed. There is no use of having all those things. So I think the government must take it seriously. And as far as the Delhi is concerned, I repeatedly tell you, if somebody is getting the 1/3 of his requirement, he cannot fulfill the needs of the people. The government, central government has to come forward, has to give the adequate amount of oxygen. Only then he will be able to manage the hospitals which are in the city. So this is where the entire blame.
No, I agree with you on
with
the
center
aspect of
only.
oxygen, sir. I agree with you that in terms of oxygen distribution and in terms of allocation, it's the centre's responsibility, and therefore we are questioning the centre as well. But besides the oxygen issue, in other areas, in planning and implementation and execution, the Delhi government have miserably failed to reach out to the people. Today, it has lost the confidence of the people to the extent that, let me tell you, civil citizen groups are coming together. We do a program on it every afternoon to actually celebrate those who are filling up for the government of the day. They are having little community partnerships to provide the numbers where beds are available, to provide oxygen cylinders who are immediately in need of it. This is not actually the citizens' job to fend for themselves. Mr. Vasudev, one more aspect which is important is that when we talk about the court observations and directives, can it be binding? Can there be punitive action? We've heard about a contempt of court action, that has been talked about today. That has been stayed by the Supreme Court, however. But what kind of punitive action do you envisage that can be taken by the courts in order to make sure that the governments do not deter in this manner?
Look at it this way. The direction by the court has to be followed. In 2012, the Supreme Court held that even a direction in public interest is an executable order. In Picta's case, they said that if there is an order by the court and it is not followed in the public interest, it is an action which is open for the court to take further action against the officers. Now, on your program just now, the representative also mentioned the fact that these bureaucrats who have failed should be taken to task. That is the statement which we just heard. Pray tell me who's going to take action against them. One thief doesn't punish the other. He does not go, it's not the situation of set a thief to catch a thief. It is to catch a thief, how do you catch him? You have got bureaucrats who are doing nothing, ma'am. Look at the Disaster Management Authority. Look at the enormous powers. Yes. And what is interesting in this whole thing and what is, should I say, shocking. If communities, members of private citizenry can set up oxygen banks, a scooter driver sells his wife's jewelry to put up an oxygen cylinder in his scooter to give people their supplies of need. If a taxi driver sells his vehicle to get oxygen cylinders to supply people on a particular platform, what is the government doing? Selling us to do nothing? Is this what we have come to? An ordinary citizen is standing up and giving you assistance. Learn from him. Learn from the Sikh community. Learn from the other communities which have come up and given you all the assistance. You put up an ITVP hospital for 500 beds in land given to you by donation, and you don't have oxygen for it. Isn't it a crying shame? Is this governance? I think these gentlemen in governance, everyone, be it center or state, should now resign, go home, put their heads in a small bucket of water and drown themselves. We have shamed our citizens. See the international press.
I so relate to what you said, Mr. Vasudev, because it's about crisis management. There's been abysmal mismanagement of resources, and it simply doesn't do to use this excuse of having a shortfall of resources alone.
Hamida, please give me a minute.
Yes.
We began our innings in the last 7 years to say that we are going to have a country which is self-sufficient. We were accepted as a very powerful nation meant to do things. Today we are begging for everything. We are the persons who have come forward to say, please give it to us. We are unable to cope. Why are you unable to cope? Because you didn't build infrastructure. You did not build hospitals. You did not build roads. What you did was showed off.
Yes.
We are showing off. We are a bunch of pompous
And you know what we now need, Mr. Vasudev? The least we need now is a collective effort. We need a collaborative effort, Mr. Ravi Srivastava. We don't need this blame game anymore. Can we at least get past this center-state dispute and shifting of responsibility?
I have something.
That is again something which really makes people angry. That on one hand you have the citizens fighting the virus. On another level, they're actually fighting their own elected government. There are two battles that the citizens are fighting today. Mr. Srivastava.
Ma'am, before Mr. Srivastava comes in, can I ask Mr. Srivastava and people whom he represents and the government to follow the example of the common man?
Yes, please go ahead.
Follow the example of the common man of the street who's sacrificing his all to get oxygen to those who need it. Those who are giving up everything to fix up banks in which they're collecting medicines. They're fixing up their vehicles to take people to hospital. Follow the common man. Don't follow your ego.
Vasudev, I'm more than agreeing with you. I'm
Yes,
not
very quickly,
disputing
closing
any,
comments.
I'm not disputing with any of the facts you have presented over here. Sir, I'm with you. What I'm saying is that for last 7 years, we have
But
been
you were
only
still
subject
blaming
to...
the center, sir. You were still indulging in
No,
that
I'm
shifting of
not center.
responsibility.
I'm
Yes.
blaming the government of the day, madam, that we are becoming the Vishwa Guru and becoming a Atmanirbhar and all that.
Delhi has
Instead
also
of
had
that,
a
we did not build the infrastructure. We did
Delhi has
not build the
also had a
hospitals.
government for
We did
7
not
years.
have the medical
Okay.
facilities.
Mr. Srivastav, Delhi has also had a different government for 7 years. Center has had a different government for 7 years. What have these governments?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, I need to close the conversation. Thank you so much, Mr. Srivastav and Mr. Vastev, for joining us. It's about administrative failures. It's literally about failure of governance. There is no two ways about it. On a good day, you do your job. Your competence is put to test when the country is facing a crisis, when there is a disaster. Do you manage to perform under pressure or do you succumb? That is the question we are raising, and that's precisely what the courts are also asking today. Thanks for watching The Big Story on Mirror Now.